Welcome to the I Believe podcast, and a Cure Insight production, brought to you by Castle Biosciences. I'm your host, Danet Peterson, a fellow ocular melanoma survivor. Here on the podcast, we'll be sharing information and insights on treatments, research, and living with ocular melanoma.
Castle Biosciences tests are designed to provide clinicians precise and personalized tumor information for the benefit of patient care. If you would like more information about how Castle is transforming the treatment of eye cancer, visit castletestinfo.com.
I'm Danet, the host of the I Believe podcast, and I'm also a patient with ocular melanoma. And today I am joined with 5 other people. And Lisa is a caregiver to Mark, who's an ocular melanoma patient. And then we have patients Hannah, Kenny, Lindsay, and Lori, who are joining us from various places around the country. And this is our first time doing this scale of a live, if that makes sense. So bear with us as we're kind of working out any of the kinks, and hopefully technology will cooperate with us. We're gonna everybody say a prayer. But we are live today to talk to you guys about our personal journeys with integrative oncology. And this has really looked different for everybody, but I just want to open this up with just a brief disclaimer. I am the host of the I Believe podcast, and I'm here as a patient. So I'm here to talk with these patients, patient to patient, kind of similar to the way that we talked about enucleation in one of the past episodes. So I'm not here to offer specific advice. I'm not joined by a medical professional. I'm just joined by patients sharing their experiences, and we just want to offer this chance for all of these patients to communicate, what does this look like, and just to help to dispel some of the uncertainty around what do we do, right? What do we do when we have metastatic disease or when we're waiting and we don't want to be just stuck waiting? What do we do? And what are some of the things that can feel empowering as patients? So I'm really glad that you guys are all joining me today, and I feel really fortunate to know all of you on a lot more of a deeper level, I feel like, than I know some other patients. So I just want to go ahead and let's get everybody introduced. You guys know me. I'm Danet. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and I do have metastatic diagnosis, but I'm currently free of disease as of about 7 or so months ago. Lisa, do you want to go next? I'm just going to follow across my screen.
Sure. I'm Lisa Durbin. My husband's Mark Durbin, and he was diagnosed with metastatic disease in 2020. And currently he is stable. He's been stable for right around 30 months after immunoembolization. So
can we just define the difference between stable and free of disease? So stable for Mark means he has lesions on his liver, but they have not grown in a period of time, correct?
Yeah, so we were looking kind of at his markers from June of 2020, and he is exactly, his tumors are the exact same size as when we started 3 years ago. They grew a little bit right after he got his biopsy, and then after he only had 2 immunoembolizations, 4 full rounds. No, 2 treatments. I'm kind of going off track here, but 4 treatments total when we went to Philadelphia, and he's been stable since December of 2020.
Okay. So, all right, Hannah, what about you?
Yeah, I'm here from Austin, Texas, so really excited to be on today's call. I was diagnosed with my eye in September of 2016. Was free. They just did proton beam radiation up in Boston. I still have my eye. And then in December of 2021, I was diagnosed with METS. I had a spot in my liver and a spot on my spine. We've been on the natural journey since May of that following year. I did get the spot on my liver, which I think we'll talk about, removed surgically as they did the biopsy. And to date, I have no additional spots in my liver, but I did just get a set of scans that are concerning for a couple more spots on my bone. So we can talk a little bit about that. But other than that, I've been pretty stable.
Okay. And I do want to just, as I just thought of this, let's backtrack really fast and let's just chat who had a biopsy, who did not, like an eye biopsy, and what was the result of that eye biopsy if you had that result. So for me, I got a class 2 diagnosis from my eye biopsy back in original treatment time in 2020. And obviously, I have now since gone metastatic, but I'm still okay right now. Lisa, what about Mark? Did you guys have a biopsy done?
Yeah, so that was back in 2011. He came back class 1A.
Okay.
So he had that done. And then now I'm just kind of studying I don't even know what you call it, the mutations.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the trends and the time differences between, like, because a class 2 diagnosis historically or, statistically is more likely to metastasize between years 2 and 5 after diagnosis. Whereas someone who's a class 1A, I think it's like up to 15 years. It's like 10 to 15 years after diagnosis, which is crazy because that's such a long time. Hannah, what about you?
Yeah, he was almost 10 years.
Yeah, so I didn't get a biopsy of my eye, so they never classed me.
They never
for
knew.
my eye.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So now that we took care of that, I'm going to move on to Kenny, and we'll go through the rest of the introductions real quick. All right, Kenny, you are up.
Okay, my name is Kenny Raines. I'm from Hot Springs, Arkansas. I was diagnosed with ocular melanoma in my right eye in August of 2021. Had brachytherapy and ultimately have kept the eye but have lost the vision. And so also had a biopsy done and was in the lowest statistical group to spread and get Mets, and currently at this time I do not have Mets, and the tumor itself in the right eye is continuing to shrink.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for being here all the way from the Midwest, where it's hot and humid, as we talked about earlier. All right, Lindsay, and what about you?
Yeah, so I'm Lindsay Brown. I'm here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was diagnosed last year in May 2022. I did get a biopsy done and was put in the class 2 category based on tumor size. And I did have enucleation, so this eye is beautifully fake. But yeah, that's.
I forgot I muted myself. I was just saying I loved what you said. Beautifully fake. I think it's great though. Like, honestly, I think you and me are the only ones here on the call who have a prosthetic eye, but I think we both have had a pretty good experience as far as the painting of that eye goes. So I'm grateful for that. Well, thank you, Lindsay, for being here with us. And Lori, what about you?
Hi, welcome. I am from Wilmington, Delaware. Yes, welcome. I was originally diagnosed in June of 2016 and had radiation plaque therapy, was cancer-free for 3 years. I did have a biopsy, but I think mine was different. It was done by the Perelman Institute, and it really just came up with low, moderate, or high risk of metastasis. And then it told me about the type of tumor I had. So it just told me I had a moderate risk of metastasizing. But I didn't get like a class this or that from it.
Okay.
And then in August of 2019, I metastasized to my liver. Since then, I have metastasized to my lungs and both breasts. Everything within the past 4 years is still relatively small. And I've, well, we can get into more of what I've done, but they're still relatively small. My tumor burden's still relatively small, even though I have about 15 lesions in there. And my lung burden is also pretty small.
Okay. Yeah, and like you said, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about kind of each of the journeys of these individual people, myself included. But just kind of generally, let's just talk about what led you to pursue, like if you could sum it up in 2 to 5 sentences, what led you to pursuing integrative oncology care, like some level of holistic, naturopathic, functional medicine, in addition to whatever you have already pursued in the conventional medicine world. I guess I will go first really fast. For me, it was actually Lori's story. I saw Lori on Facebook, and she was saying she was 3 years metastatic free, or metastatic like stable, not metastatic free, but she was stable. And that was unheard of for me in the Facebook groups. I think I was coming across people who had passed away. I was coming across really triggering stories of people who just were not doing well with metastatic disease. And she was one of the first people I saw who was doing well. And I latched onto that. I didn't have metastatic disease at the time, but I really latched onto that. And that just gave me a ton of hope. And it gave me a lot of confidence going into researching for myself and just figuring out a plan. I guess that was more than 5 sentences. Sorry, guys. All right, Lisa, you're up.
Well, I think for us it was fear-based. I think that kind of growing up, we always thought that doctors would fix our boo-boos, and when we found out that he had metastatic disease, we knew going from 2011 to 2020, we knew at that point that it was. I'll just be honest. We just looked at each other and we knew that was a death sentence. And so to go to, the natural way, we just wanted to know everything that we could. And I think we were driven out of fear because we had no roadmap. And then the fear has subsided now because we have learned. So that's how we got started.
Oh, I love that. And I think that's important to recognize too, that like everybody's decisions, the things that we do for ourselves, like we're all going to be making decisions from different perspectives, from different, places. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, that journey is somehow incorrect. Like if you approach it from a place of fear and it gets you to a place where you can then be less fearful, I think we all we could argue that's kind of what we all do, right? Like we all look at it and go, well, I'm afraid of not doing well and of dying, so I want to do something to alleviate that fear.
Yep.
All right. So Hannah, what about you? What led you to this route and this pursuit?
Yeah, and I know you did not do this on purpose today, but I'm glad I'm following Lisa because I kind of feel like I had the same kind of experience when I was initially diagnosed with metastatic disease. It was fear. The options that my primary oncologist gave me were not great. They were for skin melanoma and the outcomes were not great. And my husband actually has a lot of just interest in natural medicine. And he was like, well, let's just go explore it. Let's find a natural doctor. Let's talk to them about it. And we did, and we kind of jumped on that train. And then kind of segueing in, I saw Lori's story on Facebook as well. And I was like, this is really working for her. And I think like this is the route I want to go. So kind of a combination of those three things.
Yeah, no, I love that. Kenny, what about you? And I know like Kenny and Lindsay, you guys have not had any metastatic disease, but you guys are also very passionate about doing anything you can to keep it from happening. And so Kenny, what led you to making the changes that you have had in your lifestyle and just continuing to support that?
I think very similar here. This diagnosis, at least like where my tumor was specifically, I was losing vision almost on a daily basis. And so you're watching in real time this tumor grow inside your body. Then of course you hop on Google and you start seeing, like you said, just some disturbing realities that can come with this disease. And I remember going up to Mayo Clinic and, I just got like every book I could get on different philosophies, like out-of-the-box cancer treatments was a good one that I read. Eat to Beat Disease was another one with a very interesting thought of angiogenesis and anti-angiogenic foods and just things that you can put in your body to prevent tumor growth. But ultimately, here's what I would sum up, is I played college football and played offense and ultimately am just used to being on offense and used to doing things proactively. And with this disease, if you're not metastatic, the literal approach is to just wait till you get it. No preventative, nothing, no treatment. We're just going to keep scanning you every 6 months, maybe more frequently than that, depending on what group you're in. And we'll talk when you get cancer everywhere else. And I wasn't cool with that. I still obviously go and get the scans, but even just mentally, that puts you in such a terrifying, bad place that it inevitably has repercussions on other aspects of your health, mentally, emotionally. And so even with me doing these things, doing this research, even if I can't prove statistically that it's helping, for example, if it does nothing else, it at least makes me feel that I'm doing things. And there's no doubt that the placebo effect does have empirical data supporting that your mentality makes a big impact on your health.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think that's such an important point. I think both aspects of what you said is that placebo effect and belief, and just believing that what you're doing is helping you, but also that proactive approach of, instead of the sit and wait and kind of like feel like you're what's the word for it, that you are at the mercy, so to speak, of your cancer. Like, take it by the reins, right? That's really what we've all done on some level, whether it's adjuvantly and in a pre-metastatic space or post-metastatic. Like, it doesn't really matter when it happens, but like, if you can come at it from that place, that offensive position, like you said, you know, to use a football term, I shouldn't talk football because I don't know football, but sorry guys, sorry Kenny, full disclosure, you can unfriend me later, but just having that offensive approach can feel so empowering. And I think that, like, we could all agree, like everybody on here would agree, that just the fact that we're doing what we're doing on some scale helps empower you to feel like you're going to be okay, and that you're going to be more okay because of what you're doing. All right, sorry for the segue. Lindsay, what about you? What led you to your pursuit of this kind of offensive approach?
Yeah. So as you said, I'm not metastatic currently. But to Kenny's point, the messages were loud and clear that basically you're going to be okay until you're not. And it was more the unwillingness to just sit in that gray space until something bad happens. That's not my personality. That's not how I live my life. I'm not one to just sit around and wait for things to happen. And so, especially when it comes to, hey, sit around and wait for this disease to maybe probably kill you someday, that's not interesting to me, to just sit and wait. And so it was actually a combination of understanding that wasn't how I wanted to live my life, and also my oncologist, who recommended more natural approaches and more Eastern medicine approaches. And what was really interesting was when I was presented with the option of a clinical trial that didn't have really great data supporting the success of it, I chatted with him and I was like, you know what, I think I'm more interested in more sort of holistic, integrative approaches. What are your thoughts? And he said, you know, I support you. You know your body best.
Wow.
You know what you're going to stick to and what you're going to believe in. He said, I've seen some wild success stories with integrative medicine and with more holistic approaches. And so if that's what you're comfortable with, I support you. And so that was really, really big for me. And I feel like I lucked out in terms of the oncologist I ended up with from the get, just because of that wholehearted support.
No, I love that. And I think that can be a difficult thing in this realm, right? Kind of the war, so to speak, between conventional medicine and traditional medicine. And I don't think that it's meant to be a war, right? Like, I think conventional medicine wants to help, and I think traditional medicine wants to help. They just both have different ideas of who's right about doing that. And I think what I've come to realize as a patient, and you guys tell me if you agree with this, is I don't want to be pulled at by two sides. I just want to be able to make the decisions that feel the best to me, that feel right for me. And I want doctors who support that, regardless of if they agree on one end or the other, or if they would do it themselves. But I think when it comes down to it, like Lindsay, like what you said, like we have to make the decisions that we feel the most comfortable with, because if we don't, then I think that we constantly will question where we are on the path, whatever that treatment path looks like. All right, Lori, I don't want to miss you. So Lori, what led you to this realm?
Well, Lisa, did you want to add something first?
Oh,
yeah, I wanted to say, I raised my hand like this, like a little kid in classroom.
Good job.
Well, I wanted to interject that basically what you guys are saying is something that I wish that Mark and I had done back in 2011, because we really did have the chance to go integrative and to basically have that roadmap, like I was saying, to he had a 2% chance of metastasizing. I mean, who knows where that number really is? I mean, who knows? But you know, he had such a low percentage, and we were literally on year 9.5 years, and stress really hit our family hard. My husband's dad died. We had a lot of things going on, but had we, you know, integrated, you know, integrative medicine into that, I feel like his immune system would have been fighting for itself, and we would have known some methods basically to conquer that stress. And I commend people who don't have metastasis, who are taking this approach early, because I would have done, now if I would have gone back, I would have done everything differently. Woulda, shoulda, coulda, I know, but
Yes.
I'm proud of the people who are doing it differently. So.
And that's a great segue into me, because I feel the same exact way. I got into this after about 2.5 years when I was, you know, cancer free. I was like, okay, I know I've got a good chance. Why don't I start getting my body ready? Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine gave me 2 books, Radical Remission and The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. And so right away I started keto. I didn't start it the right way, like for my body, but I just started the whole process of keto. And within the month that I started with my naturopathic doctor, I found out I metastasized. So I was already with her, and the trial that my oncologist wanted me on was offering stability, but my scans were showing stability. And I asked, well, why would I go on this potentially toxic trial if I'm already giving myself stability? And he said, well, because it might be closed when you need it. Well, I took that chance, and I've been taking that chance ever since. And I work really hard, but I also am really healthy. I've worked a lot on my fear, and I'm actually healthier than I've been in 20 years, minus this cancer. So I do wish I had started sooner. I wish, yeah. But that's the other thing. It really touched me to hear how I've impacted other people choosing to add integrative oncology into their regimen. And maybe I wouldn't have been able to do that had I started earlier.
Yeah, Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, Lori, your interview that you did with Danet is the first time I heard about that Radical Remission book. And that book has been an incredible, powerful resource that I've used in making the sweeping changes that I've made in my health. So thank you.
This one.
Lindsay, I'm going to piggyback off you, because that was the first time I had heard of it too. And I know she has a docuseries out now. I really want to watch that as well. Mm-hmm. But no, I definitely agree. And I actually want to circle back to something, Lisa, you highlighted, where I think you connected some of the stressors in Mark's life to potential metastatic triggers. And mm-hmm. I can also correlate some of my own stress in my life to some of the metastatic timelines that I have. So I think that is another thing that I would love to hear others talk about, is just, were there stressors in your life that you can cite, and how are you navigating reducing that stress? Lori, I heard you talk a little bit about it, but I can totally cite specific things in my life. You know, I had my son, first kid I ever had, and I did not even know what I was doing, and 9 months later I'm metastatic. So I wanted to circle back to that, Lisa.
Oh, I think that's a good point.
Well, yeah. I know for a fact that those stressors in his life just triggered it, because he was doing so well, and I watched him decline so rapidly when certain things happened in his life. And that's the one thing that I can pinpoint. I feel it deep within my soul that, you know, his father dying and some other things, he just wasn't the same human. And my husband, Mark, is one of the happiest, if not the happiest person I've ever met in my life. He, you know, we kind of call ourselves the Tiggers in life, so we're not Eeyores. And I remember back in that time period in 2020, you know, there was COVID, there was all these things happening to people. I just saw that Tigger kind of becoming an Eeyore, and boom, it happened. And here we are. So.
Well, I think this has been a good discussion, and I love how everybody is. I feel like everybody's really respectful of like just giving each other time to talk. And so I want to talk a little about the pros and cons. And Kenny, you've been kind of quiet. What do you feel like are some of the pros and cons of this kind of approach? I know for you, it's kind of it's been a little bit of like a do-it-yourself approach where you're just reading lots of books and learning. So what have been some of the limitations of that, and what have been the positives?
Yeah, it's a great question, Danae. You know, I would say in regards to positives, you know, number one is just that mentality shift and just how critical it is to work on yourself mentally because of the darkness that the situation inevitably brings. Even if everything else in your life is good, there's just this overwhelming shadow of, you know, when is it actually going to happen? And so dealing with that, I feel like integrative approach have helped me significantly deal with that demon and just kind of press it back. And, you know, in regards to other pros, a lot of these different supplements, foods, diets, they can make you feel better physically. You know, like if you clean up and you're not eating as much junk food and you're eating blueberries and broccoli and these other healthier foods that are packed with antioxidants and other just types of things that are helping your body perform at a higher level, you know, that's also just going to make you feel better in general, which once again, it just creates this positive snowball effect. I think the cons can be, it can be extremely expensive to try to do integrative approaches. Your insurance coverage is going to be almost non-existent. Maybe you guys have a different experience if you have Mets, and I'm just not really sure what's covered in that case. But, you know, fortunately, I'm in a position career-wise, job-wise, to where I'm not as concerned with, you know, spending extra money on food and supplements, that thing. But it can be extremely expensive depending on what types of foods and supplements you're wanting to put into your body.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess I would add too to the cons, like that one of the most difficult things about this for me at first, and I grappled with it, but one of the first things that was difficult for me was having the, okay, you do have metastatic disease. We're pretty confident it's uveal melanoma. We need to do the biopsy, all the doctor's appointments, and everything that comes with the initial metastatic diagnosis. And if you have had that personally, you understand what that looks like. It's months of doctor's appointments, extra scans, all of these things are happening, and they're just kind of rapid fire. It's very similar to the initial diagnosis, where there's just so much going on, and they're just trying to figure out what's the path forward. So that created, for me, a level of overwhelm, right? And that level of overwhelm and stress was something that I had to grapple with like every day, because I was just wanting to be able to implement some of these things I was reading about from the Radical Remission book, from the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, from starting to work with a naturopath, but like not having very much time on my plate to do so. And so that overwhelm was difficult for me to grapple with. And the only way I could get past it was to come to a place where I just decided that no matter how small the action that I took, whether it was that I could do one thing new that week or that month or that day, one thing new that my doctors were recommending, or that this book that felt intuitively right to me, if I could just do that one thing and I would start doing that and add that to my regimen or add that to my daily routine, I was going to trust that that one thing would be enough to help. And I had to just adopt that mentality because I couldn't do 100 different new things. I couldn't add all the new supplements they were suggesting. I couldn't go through this page by page recommendation from this integrative oncologist of marvelous ideas and tips and wonderful things that would probably all be beneficial to my body, but I couldn't do it all that day. And so I had to release that feeling that I could do it all at once and just focus on allowing space, I think, for the one action and the one change to be enough, even if I could just do it a little while. Hannah, do you have anything else? I think you had a hand up earlier, I thought.
Oh, no, I was just piggybacking off of something.
No, that's good. I just saw this. It was fine. Kenny, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to also state that you bring up an important point, is also figuring out what you'll actually do. I have come across a lot of very interesting approaches, and I would highly encourage anybody that has cancer, go get the book Outside the Box Cancer Treatments. If you just want to see like anything that's out there, that's a good book. That also, everything that they're recommending is tied to some sort of white paper research that you can go look at if you wanted to go and see where they're actually pulling the recommendation from. But there's no way. It would be impossible to do everything that they recommend in that book, but that's not the point. And even in the book, they're just like, if there's something that you can do, try it. And so that's a very important point, is figuring out realistically what you will do consistently will probably have better results than trying 100 things once.
Yeah, exactly. And Lindsay, you kind of talked about this too, where your doctor just said, if you think you'll stick with this, then do this.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of feedback that he gave me, and really simple but really powerful, in that, like, here are a whole bunch of different options laid out in front of you. Like, pick the ones that resonate, pick the ones that you believe in, pick the ones that you're going to stick with, because that consistency, I think, is a really big part of feeling like you're making progress.
Yeah, exactly.
With your own treatment. And, in doing all the research that I've done in some of these alternative health opportunities, I think a lot of it comes down to just like building an understanding about how interconnected everything is. Like, obviously what I put in my body is going to affect how I feel and affect how my body fights disease. Like, it should have been obvious to me before, but it's just all the interconnectedness of everything, like nature around me, what I fuel my body with, it's all connected to how I fight disease and how I approach, sort of staving off metastatic disease. So
yeah. Does anybody else have anything you want to add specifically, like to pros and cons? Lori, go ahead.
I think a couple pros have been making myself a priority, which didn't happen before.
And Lori, you're a mom, right?
Oh yes, yeah. My kids were 6 and 8
so,
when I was originally diagnosed.
Okay. Yeah. I think anyone who's a mom understands that feeling of,
sure.
I need to make me a priority too. Like, that's hard, but also necessary.
I've definitely improved my connection with the earth, with the universe, and with others. The sense of community has been amazing. And I'm outside more. My focus is on health and living, and I think those are all pros. Cons to this, price, absolutely. I think the time it does to do some of these practices.
Well, it's like your entire day.
It could be, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it could be sometimes, for sure.
And right, so that time, but that also goes to making yourself a priority. What would I have been doing with that time? Probably things my kids could really take care of. Asking for help has been both something I had to learn to do. And so it was hard at first. It became a positive, but asking for help was really important, but really hard.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Are you guys okay if we talk? Oh, go ahead.
And talking with your Western doctor about it, talking with your medical oncologist about it. I don't know that that's a con, but many times they greet you as if it's a con. And I think that's the hard part. I talk to so many people who hide what they're doing, and I did too for the first probably year and a half. I don't anymore. I am upfront. I tell them exactly what I'm doing. He tells me what he doesn't agree with, and I say, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks for your ideas. No, that's a good point, that communication factor. And that's something that I don't remember if it was Hannah or you. I feel like I remember talking to someone specifically and just deciding. I think it was after you had told me you'd been talking to Dr. Sato, Lori, and how you had told him, and he was like, well, whatever you're doing, like, it seems like it's working, so keep doing it.
He did for about 2 years.
And like, so, I mean, that's a good thing, but also like that is something that can be, I think, maybe a barrier within that kind of what we talked about, that kind of war between traditional medicine and Eastern medicine or Western medicine. My gosh, there's so many phrases, so many ways to talk about it. But it's, I think that communication factor, that if you have a patient who is hiding what they're doing and then they go into a surgery, or they go into, this is what my doctor framed it as, is if they go in for conventional care and conventional medicine doctors and nurses don't know what they have been putting in their body, what vitamins they've had, what other treatments might, somehow contribute to how does this treatment go for you. That can influence their decisions as doctors, and it's important, right? It's important information to have. So I try to keep that line of communication very open too, and I also bring research and show my doctor, like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. If I decide to do something that he's kind of a little like, well, I don't really know about that. Hannah, you had something to say?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something that if you are a patient and you want to explore integrative oncology, have both. Have an oncologist that you are having conversations with. Have a natural route that you have a consult with either an ND or somebody that you trust in that community that you can bounce ideas off of. As Kenny said, there's so much out there. So figuring out what feels right for you, what you can bounce off a consultative someone, but just having both. I think to your point earlier, Danet, I had an oncologist that when I told him I was doing the natural route, he disagreed. So I actually moved my care to a new oncologist, and most recently I got the scans that said I might have potentially 3 new spots in my bone. And she said to me, the oncologist did, she was like, hey, we can't deny what you were doing was working, so go back and up it. Go back and up the stuff that you were doing naturally, because I had just come off and gone down a couple things.
And that's a good point
that was super encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super encouraging. And like you said, you are the patient. You get to drive your care. And if you don't like your doctor, or you disagree, or your doctor disagrees on a level that feels conflicting, there's too much conflict, there's too much tension in that room when you're meeting with them, you have the grounds to move your care. And your doctor doesn't, that's their point of being a doctor. That's one of the reasons that they are a doctor, is to accept that they may not be the right doctor for every person. And I've had so many doctors say that they will recommend other doctors if it's not a good fit. And like, to me, that's the sign of a good doctor. A doctor who's willing to let you go to see you have better care, or to see you feel like you have better care, is a doctor that really truly cares about how you're doing. Kenny, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to bring up how important it is that you are an advocate for your own care, and also understanding that ultimately you're the patient, but you're the customer, and you can fire people that you don't agree with their approach or outlook, and you should. I think it's really not very encouraged to seek out second opinions. I have had a pretty good experience with all of the medical treatment I've received in regards to ocular melanoma, but for other things that I suffer from, that was not the case at all. In fact, when I was 20 years old, in like peak physical condition, in the middle of a college football playing career, I had one doctor, as I was having some liver issues, that decided he wanted to just cut a third of my liver out and throw it in the trash can. And fortunately, the night before that, my sister, who's a doctor, said, this is insane. I got you in the Mayo Clinic. You can go there next week. They did a procedure in 30 minutes with a balloon, didn't have to remove anything, fixed the problem, haven't had an issue in 11 years. And so, point being is, if you can afford to travel just a little bit, you can get significantly better medical treatment. For instance, for ocular melanoma, there is nobody in the state of Arkansas that's an ocular oncologist. The closest I can go to is Memphis, Tennessee, to the Hamilton Eye Institute. And so, understand that you don't have to be stuck with who is in your neighborhood.
Such a good point. Kenny, I love that. Thank you. I do want to move on to our next little segment, and let's just kind of run through, if we could just give people bullet point ideas, right? What has helped to make this affordable for you? Let's just talk about that, because we all know that that's one of the big cons of integrative oncology care, right? Is that if you do have good insurance, your insurance probably doesn't cover integrative care. They don't cover you seeing an ND or an FABNO. They don't cover your supplements. They don't cover XYZ. So Lori, you've been kind of doing this I guess you and Lisa both, between you and Mark, you guys have been doing this the longest. So what are some of the things that you have done to make this affordable for you?
I have found I found a way to get 30% off my supplements. I do yoga and HIIT exercise on YouTube.
Okay, so free exercises.
Yep. I spend a lot of time outside. I think that I have a garden. I grow my own food.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, I love that.
But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's still not a lot of money every month, and that I haven't needed help along the way, because I have.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. Lisa, what about you guys? I know most of what you have done has been a little bit more kind of on that research, implement kind of a pattern. Yeah. And I don't know that, do you guys work with an integrative oncologist yet, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, not yet. A lot of what we've done is through basically my research. And I want to express for people that feel like this is overwhelming. It is. It's really overwhelming in the beginning. And that's why you need to reach out to, you need to call people, you need to email people, you need to just not have that fear of starting, because it can be overwhelming. It's very expensive, but there are ways to cut. And, Mark, he walks a lot. We have not hired a naturopathic doctor at this point, just based on, my knowledge of doing this research. And, Mark, he's kind of fortunate because he has me doing all the research, and then I just kind of tell him what to do. And the other part of it is that he does have to be on board to doing these things. Mm-hmm. So when I come up with a new idea or I talk to somebody, I go to him and say, how do you feel about this? And there's some things that he just can't implement. It doesn't work with his work schedule. It's a timing thing. Mm-hmm. And that's another reason why I don't want people to not do it, because, we've kind of taken this simplistic approach. Now that I've narrowed it down, we've taken more of a simplistic approach. And, sometimes I get overwhelmed when I get online and I look at what other people are doing and I go, oh gosh, you kind of have FOMO. Yeah. Fear of missing out. Like, okay, wait, am I supposed to be on that one? And, you get anxiety driven, but then you kind of take a step back. Yeah. And I call it kind of sitting in your, just taking the time to sit and decide if that works for your family. Mm-hmm. I don't want people to not start it because it is overwhelming. I want them to start with baby steps. Yeah. And if Mark's metastasis were to kind of amp up, I think I would shift gears a little bit more. And it's not that I'm waiting. It's just that right now we're doing what I feel like is the right thing. It's a gut feeling for us. And again, there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. Well, there is probably bad.
There can be bad, but generally, when you're seeking to improve your health, you're going to be looking at the things that are going to help, right?
And I think his supplements, we've narrowed it down to I would say he takes about 15, maybe 20 supplements a day. And a lot of it is this, you guys. A lot of it starts with your brain and where you are mentally. And I've talked to quite a few people that are kind of down and out in the very beginning of their journey, and some of them can't even get out of bed. They just can't. So you start with the basics. Let's get out of bed today. Let's go on a 15-minute walk, and then that leads to the next thing. And that's what we need to get out to people, is that there's hope in these baby steps. And then when you get to the big steps, you feel more comfortable with what you're doing.
Exactly. No, that's a good point. And then I think it also, you brought up something that I think is also really important. You said that you guys have simplified. You guys have simplified what you do in your regimen, in his care routine. And I think that is just as important. And Lori, I think you and Hannah and really all of us would agree to this too. If you have something too complicated, it's stressful. We don't like that feeling of being more stressed by trying to take care of ourselves. It's already stressful enough knowing that we have this disease and we have to manage that stress, right? And that fear. So anything we can do to simplify, to kind of streamline, that helps a ton. And I think that is in and of itself a form of self-care, to simplify and to streamline what you're doing and to just really dial it in. So as far as associated cost, Hannah, what was something that you were able to do, like, to make this more affordable? Because I know you did something kind of a little bit different.
Yeah. So when we had gotten in touch with my ND, and I know we're wrapping up here, so I'll make it quick. They had recommended that I do a pretty intensive 3-week protocol, and they had given me the cost up front, and it was pretty significant. And so my husband and I made the decision with a group of my friends from college to open a GoFundMe, and that helped me get off the ground. And I'm so blessed that we have such a spanning support system. And I will say it's not just for the money that helped me, but I think that was just seeing people's support across the board was so overwhelming. Just seeing how many people actually care about you. And I think one of the things you were just saying about, Lisa, about getting up in the morning, just taking the next step, I think having your support system, having people there that you can lean on to just be there for you as a person, regardless if they know what to do for you, just call you and ask you how you're doing. But anyway, we did a GoFundMe, and that's been really, really helpful. And I think we're at this stage now where we've got to just evaluate our budget, because I think we know the things that we want to implement and the costs associated with that. And we've just got to figure out with our monthly budget how we make that possible and where we can cut. Do we need 5 streaming services? Probably not. So how can we just minimize that to make sure that we prioritize my health? So no, that's a good point. I think just kind of to sum up some of these different things that we can do, right? We've got budgeting, basic budgeting. That can always help find room for using money for supplements or for other care. We've got, I think Lori mentioned the like getting your supplements 30% off. There's FullScript. I believe Wellevate used to be available, but Wellevate became FullScript now. And so you can go through a practitioner. Feel free to reach out to Lori or myself. I think maybe a couple other people, but there are places where you get a link from a practitioner and you can then make a Wellevate account. It's free. Like, it's free to make this account, and then you can then get your supplements that you choose to implement or that your doctor recommends at a 30% discount. And it's extremely impactful when you have something that normally is $100 and you're getting it for 70 or less. So the other thing I was going to say too is that for different types of therapies, there are grants from different organizations, small organizations that will give you a grant. It's not always very much, but every little bit counts. Like for some of the different therapies that I know Lori and Hannah and I have done, mistletoe therapy, there's the Big Believe or the Believe Big organization, and they have a grant that patients can get for a little bit of financial aid to get their first couple mistletoe treatments. So there's a lot of possibility. I think that what we're trying to get across here, as we move on to our next little segment, is we just want people to understand that if you look for the ways it's possible, you can find them. And I think that that's really, like, would you guys all agree? Like, that's the message we want people to hear, is that if you look for the possible ways to do this, you will find them, whether it's through podcasts that are free, YouTubes that are free. Lindsay, go ahead.
Well, I just want to make it a point to say too that anyone tuning into this who feels that overwhelm, who feels that sense of just like, where do I start? How do I make this happen? I know this is important to me, but I don't know what my first step is. I guarantee any one of us on this discussion would be willing to just chat with you and just talk you through how we made that first step and how it's going. So don't,
and we all have been supporting each other as well too.
Right. Yeah. It's easy to feel alone in this, but you're not alone. We're here.
For sure.
So feel free to reach out to any one of us.
Okay, so I do want to move on really quick. I know we probably, if you guys are okay with it, if we can like maybe take another 20 or so minutes so that we have time to go through each of your kind of stories individually. We're not going to go through intensively detailed stories. If you guys want to hear more from Lisa about Mark's journey, or from Hannah or Kenny or Lindsay or Lori, please reach out to them directly. You can find them on Facebook. But I do want to go through, let's just talk about, like Lindsay, like since you just ended, let's have you finish and talk about hot and cold therapy and like just adding that in. I know I see you posting that you're in an immersion, like a cold immersion bath all the time. So tell us what led you to that point and why do you still do it?
Yeah. So there are a couple of main things that I implemented after reading that. Reading that Radical Remission book really set me on the path of looking for ways that I can really heal myself from the inside out. And that was a really important piece of it. I see a spinal network chiropractor who does nervous system adjustments is essentially what it does to heal old traumas, heal old injuries, and to really optimize the function of the nervous system. So there's no twisting, no turning, no cracking, no popping. It's really a gentle way of tapping into your body's resources where those exist to help your body heal itself. And she's actually, Dr. Mel is her name. She's the one who I saw do all these cold plunges. And I thought, oh, that looks kind of crazy. I'm going to try it. And so I actually did my first cold plunge prior to learning about the incredible benefits that come with it. You're essentially choosing to put your body in cold shock, and when you go into cold shock, your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases, the dopamine and adrenaline that your body produces and your brain produces increases. But then what's super interesting is like 45 seconds in, your body kind of settles into that rest and digest system, that parasympathetic system. And so all of a sudden you're going from shock to extreme calm. Mm-hmm. And you develop this high when you do it. And in doing all the research that I've done so far, there's this researcher, I think her name is Joanna Soberg, from one of the European countries. I don't know which one specifically, but she talks about how these cold plunges decrease the chronic autoimmune inflammation in your system. They increase metabolism. It strengthens your nervous system. It regulates your blood sugar levels. It improves your sleep quality. And so all of these things are benefits that I have felt in doing my daily cold plunges, whether it be a full submerge situation or just a cold shower if I'm on a time crunch. But that's certainly been something that has been sincerely healing, and just the jolt of energy that I feel afterwards is pretty powerful too.
It wakes up your mitochondria.
Some cold therapy. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm working.
Yeah, there's a pretty good podcast by Andrew Huberman that goes over a lot of those results. I actually just went and bought a horse trough. I've got one on my patio that I use for cold plunge.
All right, so Kenny's going to start posting about his cold plunges too. He's going to post on Facebook for us. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
I just do it in my bathtub.
That's great.
That works too. Yeah. Yep.
Kenny, I want to see you put on a pair of boots, like cowboy boots, and a hat, and then just get in that cold plunge. I want you to be on a podcast doing that.
Yeah,
I'm expecting that.
I've got to work a little bit on my abs before that, but Joe Rogan. But yeah, I did.
Oh my goodness!
This last week I was in Colorado, and the water up in the Rockies is absolutely freezing. So I just did a cold plunge up there in the alluvial fan. It was just like refreshing to the soul.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was talking to my husband last night.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just talking to my husband last night about how much we miss winter because we could just walk outside and crack the ice that that formed on top of the horse trough and just jump in. And there's so much that goes into regulating the temperature when it's outside in 95 degrees. So
yeah, exactly. No, I was going to say, like in Arizona, my pool, we didn't heat my pool. And so I started doing cold plunges and cold therapy in the winter because I was like, well, I mean, my pool is already really cold. I may as well give it a shot. And what I've found interesting, and Lindsay, I think you probably have discovered this too since you do it so often, is your body gets so much faster at getting to that parasympathetic point, that your level of like that shock and then the calm happens so much more quickly the more you do it. And I think that level of being able to drop into the parasympathetic nervous system is very helpful to our body. Like Lori said, it's helpful to our mitochondria, and like there's so many different levels and ways to look at the research to show that it's beneficial and it's helping you. Okay, so let's see. I'm like jumping all over the place. Hannah, I'm gonna have you go next. Can you talk a little, like, I know your approach has been a little different. You mentioned the 3-week intensive, so let's kind of backtrack a little bit before that, and let's talk about like your reasoning and rationale for treating surgically.
Yep. So I was diagnosed in December 2021. They just saw one spot on my liver. It was pretty anterior. So they're like, hey, we're going to try and go in, just look at it, see if we can just get the whole thing. So I got a liver resection in that January of 2022, and they got it with clean margins. They said that there was nothing else in there. And originally when I had gone in for the resection, they were saying, we might just end up doing a biopsy, but if we go in and we don't see anything else and we can just clearly get that, we're going to just do it. So they just pulled it out, and that's when they did the biopsy, confirming that it was Mets. I got a PET scan saying that, hey, we see something in your spine too. So I went back to Boston because I was traveling Austin to Boston because those were where my doctors were at the time. And I got a biopsy of my back, confirmed that that was also metastatic. And that's when we really went the natural route. We listened to a podcast through, oh gosh, I don't even remember. Oh, it was Chris Beats Cancer, I think. That's who we first initially listened to, Chris Work. That's another resource if you're just exploring initial resources. Chris Work, Chris Beats Cancer is really great. But we were listening to someone from the Reardon Clinic, and that was how we found the Reardon Clinic, is where I've been getting my care. Dr. Timms originally, and now Dr. West. And he recommended 3 weeks of a combination of mistletoe therapy, and he wanted me to do intravenous. I know that many of us on the call probably do injections at this point, but I was doing intravenous mistletoe. I did IV vitamin C, which I'm still continuing my care there, and then also ozone therapy, which is injecting oxygen molecules directly into your blood and giving it back. So I was doing that for 3 weeks, and then when I came home, luckily with the Reardon Clinic, I can get my IV vitamin C and mistletoe injections directly mailed to my house. So I've been continuing that. The other thing too, is I kind of heard everybody mention, diet is just so important. So healthy, whole foods. Some of us are on keto. I know I'm just on plant-based, but I also introduced fasting, which I had never fasted in my life, coming from an athletic background. I don't know, Kenny, if you ever did it, but I was like, that's crazy to not eat for 24 hours. But it's amazing how fast your body can adjust to the fasting state and how beneficial that has been as well.
Yeah, that's like the best bang for buck one that you can do.
Well, and that's, I mean, fasting is free. Nature bathing, free. Yeah. Listening to a podcast, free. YouTube, free.
I'm ending my 3-day fast tonight at dinner time.
Yeah. Well, and there's another test. I think, Hannah, you did this one. Lori, did you do the nutrition genome? Yeah, I did the nutrition genome. I'm going to be meeting with someone to discuss that in the next month. But Hannah, because I think that's important to just draw the distinction between, is Lori does keto. She does keto that's specific to her body in alignment with the nutrition genome.
Right, so it's like the
nutrition genome is an external test. Yeah, it's looking at various different things. It's looking at how your body utilizes nutrients on a genetic level and what nutrients deficiencies is it prone to. There's a lot of different things. The nutrition genome test, which is a separate test you can pay for independently. You don't actually have to have a doctor to do it, but it gives you this long laundry list of recommendations and ideas. So Hannah, I'm assuming your nutrition genome shows that you can convert plant-based molecules into the type of energy your body needs. Most people can't do that. My body specifically says I can't convert plant-based forms of omega-3 and omega-6s. I can't convert those by myself. So I have to have oily fish, like salmon, things like that. But those individual recommendations that help you to tailor what you're doing, why you're putting something in your body, that helps remove some of the question and the overwhelm of what are you going to do and how are you going to do it. So that's just one resource of something that you can do. Let's see. So Kenny, can you tell us, like, I know you mentioned a couple books. Can you just run off a list of a few books that you feel like if somebody were going to start reading, like books and author names, if you have the author names, but just go through some of the titles of books you'd recommend, and then maybe the top 2 things that you've done and implemented yourself.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the number one book that I have found helpful so far is called Eat to Beat Disease by William Liu. The next book, and also just an overview of that book, Eat to Beat Disease, is that could be useful for just about anything, not just necessarily cancer related, but it goes into essentially 5 different systems that your body uses to fight various diseases. I found one of the most interesting principles in that book being the concept of angiogenesis, which is essentially how does your body develop blood vessels. And so, for instance, with cancer, it's a problem that your body is developing blood vessels that end up feeding these tumors, because we have these cancer cells in all of us that are running around rogue. It's just a cell that refuses to die. But it's not a problem until that cancer gets hooked up to blood vessels and then becomes a tumor. And as it's taking nutrients in, it's pumping cancer cells out to the rest of your body. And so you can eat foods and do things that lower your body's ability to have angiogenesis. But if, for instance, you had diabetes, it's the complete opposite. You would want to eat foods that increase your body's ability to develop blood vessels, right? That's why diabetics are notorious for not healing real well, is because those blood vessels also provide nutrients to heal wounds. And so anyway, it's just a philosophic approach to how to tweak the various parameters of your body's own immune system. The outside the box cancer therapies is another really good book that covers at a depth I think you'll find hard to beat at a level that a human can actually read, right? So it provides the rabbit holes and white papers if you so choose to go down them, but also it's something that at a glance you can pick up some various therapies. So also just doing various research. There's several other books. I probably should have prepared a list, but there's 2 supplements that come to my mind that are very interesting, that are not very expensive. Turkey tail mushroom is one that they're doing extensive research with breast cancer on. Even in Western medicine, it's been known about in Eastern medicine for a long time. Moringa is one that a lot of people have probably not heard of, that has been used extensively to prevent cancer growth and even reverse cancer growth in Eastern medicine. It's a tree that essentially you can use every part of the tree, sometimes referred to as the miracle tree. Melatonin's another interesting one, but there are some supplements, and a lot of these things you can just find in food or just buy the food directly, right? Like you could actually buy straight up moringa leaves, or you could buy actual turkey tail mushrooms. It's just easier to buy them.
You could grow a moringa tree.
I literally have
I've been given a moringa tree seed and I have yet to plant it.
I had like a plan for like this 18 acres I've got out west of Hot Springs to like make a farm to grow supplements, because I was just like, this is so ridiculously unaffordable. I just want to make a company that makes affordable supplements for treating cancer. But to be determined. We'll get there eventually. I'm
to be continued.
Machines right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kenny, I think that's great. Thank you. Just for the sake of time, and if you guys, anyone else has anything else to add in as we get through everybody, then don't hesitate to let me know. But Lori, I want to go through a little bit of what you've talked about, and just I guess for the sake of time, let's point people to your episode on the podcast to listen to kind of a little bit more of the beginning of your journey.
Okay.
But I want to talk a little bit about some of the more recent things that you have done. Because I know you've done some kind of newer things that hadn't previously been done. Like you've done is it hyperthermia to the liver?
Hyperthermia to my liver. So it's the heat to my liver. It was liver directed. And that's to sensitize my tumor cells to treatment. And the treatment I was doing was IV mistletoe therapy, IV vitamin C, and then the systemic, my diet, my exercise, the whole metabolic change I've made in how I live. I also, from a doctor's recommendation, an integrative doctor out in California, told me that there's great research on melatonin and stage 4 cancers, doing 1,000 milligrams a night for a week. I was like, I checked with my regular ND, and she said, well, give it a shot. So I don't get scans until mid-January, so July. I wish I could give you like some great news, but that's what I was just out in California doing, and it was
for about 6 weeks, right?
The hyperthermia, the IVC, and the IV mistletoe for 6 weeks, yes. And it was an amazing experience to just be there focusing on my health. It was hard to be away from home, but it was amazing. And I did, and I continue with my regular fasting. And there was at one point where I think I was doing the melatonin, I was doing the IVs, I was doing the hyperthermia. I was on a 3-day fast. I was like, what else? Like, just
what else?
How
like,
else
give it
could I
to
help
me.
my body? Like, here we go. Like, I don't know. It was amazing.
Yeah. No. So Lori, can we sum up just really quick? Because I know you do so much. But if we could sum it up, I know you do therapeutic keto.
Yep.
So can you define therapeutic keto for people? Like, what is the difference between regular keto and ketosis and therapeutic keto?
Well, it's
because I do this too. So
Yep. So it's about 5% carbs, 20% protein, and then 75% fat. You're getting your energy from fat. So your ketones, you want them really 1.5 to 3. Whereas therapeutic ketones, you would be at like 0.08. I keep my blood sugar pretty regulated, at least I try to. That's one of my issues, though. I have insulin resistance, and that's actually a problem with a lot of us with melanoma, ocular melanoma.
So just regulating that blood sugar
Yep.
stability, like getting to a point where instead of doing this on your blood sugar,
Yes.
you're more regular.
And after 3.5 years, I still have trouble with it.
Yeah.
And
it seems like some of our bodies, I think, are a little more sensitive to that, for sure.
And I think one focus that California left me with, because I was so much more able to meditate out there, is that I need to incorporate that more and make that a priority here. I'm in the middle of watching Rewired by Joe Dispenza, and I just ordered some of his meditations and one of his books, and it's just a priority. I need to make it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and then
Lindsay,
I'm doing exercise, yoga, meditation.
Oh yeah, you do
coffee
exercise.
enemas.
Obviously,
Yeah,
like there's a lot that goes into individual routines and regimens. And Lori's been doing this for coming up on 4 years now, right?
Yeah, in August.
Yeah, coming up on 4 years this summer. And so in 4 years, and really, I mean, I've been doing this for 9 months, and in 9 months, I have been able to build up a regimen that 9 months ago, I never would have been able to entertain the fact that I could handle doing that, or that I would have the bandwidth or the mental capacity to handle at the level that I do now.
Exactly.
So you got to keep in mind, like everything we've learned about the brain in medicine everywhere says that the brain is capable of learning and expanding and continuing to learn. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter what you've had happen in your life, the brain is capable of creating new pathways. So just trusting that your brain, your body, like your ability to handle it will grow over time is so important to recognize, because you don't start on day 1 with what you're doing at the end of year 4.
Correct.
That does not happen. And there's also a lot of things that change. Sorry, I'm going off on a segue. Lindsay, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say coffee enemas are a brand new thing that I've started implementing and researching. And in terms of the ability to cleanse the liver, like the research is there. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's been a newfound thing.
Don't you
But
feel
I wanted
great
to ask you a
after it?
question. I feel
I
amazing
know.
afterwards.
It's
Yes.
crazy. I never would have imagined.
I know. I'm glad you brought up fasting, because that's something, if I have this question, guaranteed people tuning in have this question too. How do you manage regulating your blood sugar during your 3-day fast, and how often do you fast?
I do a 3-day fast once a month, and then I do a 24-hour fast the 2 weeks in between that. And actually, I'm going to make that a 48-hour fast now, because there was some newer research about specifically the melanoma and fasting, and that you really, really get benefit after 48 hours. But because I have so much, last night on day 2, my blood sugar was 70, which is, for me, beautiful.
A little on the low end, but that's good.
But no, it's not really on the low end. It's more towards the perfect end. You really want your blood sugar 65 to 80, which if you went into the hospital with a blood sugar of 60, they would start treating you with glucose. I would refuse it, but that's what they would start doing. So I think we've also been taught that our blood sugar is low at 70. It's low at 65, but really that's 65 to 80 is pretty perfect. But it also depends on how you feel. There have been times during a fast where I have not felt good, and so I broke my fast. You have to listen to your body.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like learning to eat with your glucose, and that's a learning curve. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes intuition, it takes listening and learning to what your body is saying.
Pick me.
Pick you, Lisa.
Pick me.
Lisa.
Pick me. So we're talking a lot about integrative medicine, and I don't want the people listening to feel like that's the only way that they can go, because, Mark's on 3 years plus, and he did do conventional medicine, very, very little. So he has been one of the fortunate ones that literally had very, very little conventional treatment. And I think for him, he needed that boost. His body went so low, right? Body couldn't fight for itself. And then we ended up in Philadelphia. He had immunoembolization and literally had such little treatment, but it was enough for his body to say, "Oh, wake up. It's time to fight." And so now we've implemented the I'm sorry, I keep getting integrative and traditional mixed up. We put in the integrative medicine after his conventional, and his immune system is off the charts, and that's 3 years later. So I don't want people to feel like, I know that they can probably do it, like, how Lori did it, but I don't want people to be like, okay, I'm going to ixnay out the conventional side, because Mark just happened to be a person that responded so well to conventional treatments. Really, really well. And then we did the holistic side after his body learned to fight for itself, because it really was low. He was at a point where, his tumor started to grow. We never expected them to metastasize, and it did. And he needed that boost. And in order to get that boost, sometimes you have to go that route. And, the doctors in Philadelphia have been extremely shocked by his, Dr. Adamo, his interventional radiologist, looked at him at one point, and I think I told you this one time, Danet, that he said, your tumors are disappearing. They're disappearing. And that's what his body's showing through his scans. So there are 2 routes to do. There's, I just don't want people to go away from the conventional side fully. If they have a question in their mind, I want them to explore and ask questions and find out more information. Does that make sense?
No, I think that's such a good point, and that segues really well into, I think, what we generally want to end with as we kind of come to a close. And thank you guys, those of you who've been watching live, for sticking with us like this. I know this has been a long episode. We have a lot of people, lots of ideas, lots of feedback. But I do want to just run through a couple other things as we kind of finish. And before I do that, I guess I'll run through what I do, because I've had so many people asking me, what am I doing? So I'm with Lisa and with Hannah in the sense that I didn't feel quite comfortable enough, or I didn't feel like I was at a place, maybe mentally or just totally, to be able to say I 100% embrace doing exactly, or not even exactly what Lori does, but just to approach it from a way where I had no help from conventional medicine. So I had a biopsy done at the same time that I had a microwave ablation done. And I did a lot of research prior to doing that. I was really nervous about doing it at first, but I talked with, like, my surgeon was a really good surgeon. Just did a ton of research anecdotally, meaning like I talked to lots of other patients and I gathered that physical, you had this experience, you had this experience, you had this experience from probably about 10 or so people. And I would now add myself to be number 11 in those people who said they had a single lesion and it stayed stable for a while, or it was just by itself, which is not very common in uveal melanoma. Usually you get one and they're accompanied by friends, and those friends are really not friends, but you know. I had one and Hannah had one, and we had something happen where we were able to have this surgically treated in a way that isolated it and has then kept our livers disease free ever since. And whether it's, I think that it's been a contributing factor, right? I think that doing that in a way that just kind of basically took away the growing point was important for me and for Hannah in our specific instances. But I also have implemented other things with my naturopathic doctor, my oncologist, Dr. Durbin, who spoke on the podcast last week. And I do ozone therapy, but I also do EBOO therapy, which I'm going to screw up the name, so I'm not going to say it, but it's EBOO, literally EBOO. And it's ozone therapy on steroids. So it basically is whatever you do with ozone therapy, multiply it by like 1,000, and like it's a higher intensity of ozone therapy. So it's oxygenating the blood, which has so many research benefits, and it actually has quite a few research benefits in liver cancer and liver metastasis, and just in helping to allow the body to filter and to also activate it so that it is aware of what does it need to do from an immune perspective. Because at the end of the day, if our immune system ignores what's happening in our body can't fight it, right? That's what our body does. It needs the immune system. It needs the metabolic system. They're all so interconnected. And so I just have continued to learn. I have a ton of blood work. Like I think it's one blood test technically, but it's probably about 30 vials of blood. I get looks every time I go to the lab. It's great. But I get blood work done every 3 months, and I get scans done every 3 months, even though I have metastasis, because I told my doctor, Dr. Moser, that I didn't want scans every 2 months. And eventually I may branch out to do scans more spaced out, but that's going to come with personal pursuit of like whatever I decide is best for me. Like you guys have alluded to, I do injected mistletoe therapy, which if you guys want to, those of you listening, if you want to research the Johns Hopkins clinical trial for mistletoe therapy, that has come out. They're in the process of funding phase 2 of that clinical trial, but phase 1 was successful and was able to show mistletoe helps on so many levels. And they only tested intravenous mistletoe, which is the IV mistletoe. And most people, because of regulations in your state, different things like that naturopathic doctors kind of have to cater to, most people will do injected mistletoe, which is just like it looks like an insulin shot, but it's mistletoe, and it's a mistletoe serum that is specifically got by a naturopathic doctor for the purpose of medicine. But generally, I think that I am looking at anything I can do to reduce inflammation in my body, and I'm looking at what is going to boost my immune system. So I do the cryotherapy, which here in Arizona, that's the equivalent of standing in a freezer that's negative 100 degrees Celsius. It's really cold, but I go and I try and do that, and a sauna, and like just a few like very specific lifestyle things. And they've just kind of gradually built on each other, if that makes sense. They built on each other, and they support each other, if that makes any level of sense. I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it other than I went from this is overwhelming to think about doing all of this to one step at a time. It's just built and it's become sustainable. So that's me. Obviously, like you guys have said, you guys can reach out to any of us, ask us more specific questions. We're all more than happy to talk about it. We love talking about this because it is such an empowering journey, I think, to be on for us. So I want to end with 2 questions. So number 1, if the time arose, and this is kind of more of I guess just a yes or no, And then if you can just sum it up in less than 30 seconds, why or why not? Would you be open if the time arose and the benefit were there or the research were there? Would you be open to pursuing a clinical trial? And what would influence your decision? Or just really, I guess, let's just dumb it down to, would you be open to more conventional medicine if needed in the future, and why? And so, Lisa, you go first. I'm just going to run down the line.
I mean, it's going to depend on what it is. So absolutely. There would have to be a lot of research into it. I don't know that I would go into a phase 1 trial. I mean, I guess I wouldn't say, and when I say I'm speaking for Mark. I mean, this is about Mark. I guess the short answer is it depends. And it depends on where he would be in his journey. I mean, if he was at the very, very end, of course. But I'd also be having him throw everything at the kitchen sink in terms of the holistic realm of things. I would exhaust that probably first for him, and then the conventional side. But Mark might be on a maintenance program here, and that's kind of what they're calling it for him. Is that if things were to start increasing in size, he's got about 5 tumors right now, all very, very small. He's still, his last report said less than 1% tumor burden, and that's 3 years out. That's a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. And so, I just think that it depends on the situation. It depends on the situation. But I think holistically, I know enough, he knows enough. There's enough people out there to reach out to. I think I would try that first, and then we'll move on to our maintenance.
Oh, I love that.
So does that make sense
at
all?
Yeah, that makes sense. Hannah, what about you? I know you're obviously kind of in a different spot right now with having just found some new spots and just being confronted with that, but your doctor gave you the keep doing what you're doing, just up it. So kind of where do you think you might fall, or where do you fall right now?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off the same thing. I think I would be open to it, but there'd have to be a lot of research, and it would have to be a trial that makes sense for me. I think for right now, I'm very limited in the sense that there aren't a lot of trials specific for the fact that I'm limited to just bone metastasis right now. There's nothing in my liver where I think a lot of trials are geared towards. So I think it would have to be something that I probably wouldn't enter a phase 1, because I've been able to do such a great job of maintaining it with integrative oncology. But yeah, I'd be open to it for sure.
Lori, what about you? Or actually, sorry, I'm going to jump to Kenny. Forgot. I'm going the other order. Kenny, you're going to have to unmute real fast.
Yeah.
There you go.
So certainly would be open to it, although I would be very hesitant at this point as I don't have Mets. I certainly understand the perspective that as you progress further and further, the more, as Lisa describes it, throwing the kitchen sink at it. And I think that certainly integrative and conventional are not exclusive to each other. There's plenty of room to do both. And certainly Western medicine, although not great at preventing disease, that is not what's emphasized. That's not what pays the money in our medical system. What they are great at is surgical procedures and invasive procedures when needed. Certainly best in the world at that. And so I think we all have had various examples of at least having something done with our eye using conventional treatments. And, then I just think that there's a lot of room to be able to do the integrative to help boost your body's own immune function. So ultimately, yes, I'd be interested, but would really want to understand what are the mechanisms they're trying to trigger.
Yeah. Yep. Lindsay, what about you? I know obviously you and Kenny both, neither of you have metastatic disease, but if the time arose that were a possibility, where do you think you would fall?
Yeah, I'd certainly be open to it. I'm at the point now where I'm open to exploring every option that exists. And I love being on this call with the split of metastatic and non-metastatic, because I can envision what my life might look like if I do have metastatic disease at some point, and still choose a more holistic route. And so I'm thankful to all of you for sharing where you're at with that. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to remain open to all options and see what the data supports. It's tricky to think of making the statement that I won't be interested if it's phase 1, because then who's going to be that phase 1? You know what I mean? Like,
well, and we can talk about this more on the podcast another time, because I do have some people who want to talk about the importance of phase 1 trials.
Right.
But there is some room for looking at, okay, where else has this trial been done? And sometimes a phase 1 trial in the United States has made it to phase 3 in Europe. And so just being aware of those kinds of nuances, that there's differences, and that doesn't necessarily write off its ability to be helpful. So keep that in mind. We will talk more about that. Phase 1 trials is going to be coming up in the ION research, which I'll talk about that at the end in a sec. Awesome. But yeah, I think that is a point that sometimes it's hard to think about, okay, do I want to be the guinea pig or do I not? And it really is such an act of courage to be in those trials. Especially if you don't have a whole lot of supportive data. It's just theories and ideas. Lori, what about you? I know you have experienced a little bit of progression off and on over the last few years.
Yep.
But obviously, like you said, your tumor load is still really low.
I amped up things naturopathically, and hyperthermia is kind of like on that edge of Western, but anyway,
it's kind of like in the gray area.
Yeah, I'm not going to rule it out. I'll never rule it out. I'm not, and that's what I tell Sato when I see him. But I just, until there's something convincing to make me totally change my way of life, like going to treatment 1 full day a week, I don't know. That would be very hard.
It would be a big leap. It would be a big change for sure.
A big leap for so many reasons. So I'm just not sure that that's where I'm at. But if I was experiencing like major progression and starting to have symptoms, I mean, I have no symptoms, then of course I would consider it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of the same way. Like, I feel like, I mean, right now, to be honest, this was kind of a harsh awakening for me, I think, at first, to realize that, like, I literally cannot be accepted in a clinical trial with no disease. I don't have anything present in scans. There's nothing on my liver. There's nothing they've been able to find anywhere else, and it's been that way since November. And that's a miracle in and of itself, and I'm going to take it for as long as I can have it. If it's the rest of my life, awesome. I will be the guinea pig that somehow survived and never had more mets. That would be great. I'm going to just put that out in the universe because that would be awesome. But I also know that if things changed, I would want to pursue with caution, clinical trials or other conventional medicine. And I'm grateful to have, I feel like, a good team that is capable of having those conversations across the board of just saying, okay, what's really going to be the best route? And the ultimate thing, I think one of the big deciding factors in me doing what I did versus what was recommended, because what was recommended by my team in Philadelphia was that I come out there for immunoembolization as quickly as possible. I didn't want to travel. I live in Arizona. I didn't want to travel unless it became absolutely necessary. And so I told my team in Philadelphia, look, you guys are amazing doctors. I can see that you're amazing doctors. You're helping these people of my friends. Like, I just cannot do that. I can't add that to my plate. That's going to be too much for me and my family. And so I think that just that's something that I had a conversation in therapy about this week, was just recognizing that whether someone does a clinical trial, isolated clinical trial, whether someone does the holistic route, whether someone does some kind of grand mix of everything, they are doing, and I think this is just the curse of social media, right? Is that comparison. We compare, well, am I doing what I should be doing if somebody else is doing this? We all run into that kind of comparison mindset where we look at what someone else is doing and we wonder, well, should I do that too? That might help me too. And we kind of start to question what we intuitively have already decided is best for us. And I think that we just have to trust and really lean into the fact that everyone in this situation with metastatic disease, with a class 2 diagnosis, everyone is going to be making decisions based on what's best for them and what's best for their family and what feels the best for their unique circumstance. and that's never going to be the same across the board. And I think that the one thing that I think we can all say, and I'm going to end with this, is I think I would venture to guess all of our fear is lower. So just to kind of prove my theory here, if 10 is your fear of dying is top of the list every day when you wake up, and 1 being you have very low fear and you're just able to live your life, where would you rate your fear on a scale of 1 to 10 as a result of you taking these actions to implement integrative oncology and to lean into this kind of process and pursuit? Lisa, where do you feel like you and Mark fall?
Oh, well, at the beginning, fear just took over. And I think I told you before, we had our heads buried in the sand for like 3 months. We just could not believe it. And, he had a kind of a different story. His oncologist, we were in Portland at the time, and this new oncologist told him he had 6 months to live. I mean, over Zoom, just said, get your affairs in order. You have 6 months. And not knowing anything about metastatic disease, we have 4 children, grown, but it was scary. It was really a kick in our stomach, basically. But so that fear was really high. That fear was, oh my gosh, I was going to die as a caregiver. And that's what I want to show other people is that, you guys are all patients. I'm Mark's caregiver. He chooses not to be on this platform, and I choose to be kind of the guiding force. And I hope that other caregivers can kind of get involved. And I think it takes the stress off of him a little bit, just kind of do this, do that. Or what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Obviously, he's very, very involved. But now, 3 years out, 3 years plus out, I'm fearful of him dying. And he's fearful of possibly dying. We're all going to die, but that's not the point. He has a disease that's a real thing. It's tangible. But the fear, to me, is maybe a 9, 8 or 9 now. It's just, I know how to navigate. I know what that roadmap looks like. And that's why I want people who are starting out on this journey to get a roadmap and to just start really small and then build. You keep talking about building. We have to build. And, we're all so accessible. I want people to realize that just that one person can change the trajectory of where your journey is. And I just cannot make that point enough, just to start somewhere. Start, whether it's integrative or conventional, just start and ask the questions. I ask a lot of dumb questions.
There's no dumb questions. Don't you know that?
Well, yeah. So fear is more subsided, and I feel more at peace. He feels more at peace at where we're at in our life. So thank you for asking that. Yeah,
of course. So I guess for me, so I can move on to everyone else. I think initially when I got the metastatic news, and it really, even when I got the class 2 news, fear was probably like an 8 or a 9, maybe a 10 sometimes. I think around scans, especially, it heightens for me. And even now it still goes pretty high. But I think that every day I am not thinking about what's going to happen and am I going to be okay? Am I going to be here in 10 years? I'm thinking about, I'm here today. I'm going to be here tomorrow. And eventually tomorrow's add up. Like that's been my self-proclaimed mantra is that I can focus on today and I can trust I'll be here tomorrow, and eventually there will be enough tomorrows and it will add up to whatever it ends up adding up to. And for me, that means that my fear levels are significantly lower. It doesn't mean I'm not triggered. It doesn't mean I don't still experience scanxiety, that I don't still feel that level of stress around scans and wanting to know, am I still stable? Am I still okay? But I would put my fear now maybe at like a 2 or a 3 right now, and I'm a week out from scans, and I don't feel horribly worried and stressed that I'm going to have scans. I feel like fear doesn't run the show anymore, if that makes sense.
Okay, Danet, I had my numbers backwards. I think I said my fear was at 9 right now.
Yeah, I was like, are you sure? Okay.
No, okay. So let's just go like this. It's
a 2 or a 3.
It's at a 1 or a 2. So yeah, I'm sorry.
It was a 10. Now it's like a 1 or a 2. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Glad we clarified that. Hannah, what about you? Oh, you're muted. There you go.
You can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay. I would say that it ebbs and flows, very similar to what you were saying around scan time. It definitely goes up, and then like life is happening in between, and yes, you're paying attention to it, but it probably runs around like a 3 or a 4 consistently. But one thing I'll add is, I think we've all been in the unique situation where not everybody in this world is confronted with their mortality in a very real way. And I think when you have a diagnosis like this and you really have to think about like, what happens if I die? Who is going to be affected? What does that look like? And you really have time to sit and think with that. For me, at least, it changed how I view life, where I put my focuses, where I try and put energy in my day. When I sign off of work, I am done with work. Whereas before it would maybe like bleed into my family life. And now I'm very good about just, I need to be here with my family because that matters to me. So I'd say for fear, it ebbs and flows, but I would say 3 or a 4 is pretty much where I sit. But I've really appreciated the ability to just live in the moment after knowing like what it feels like to really think about your death.
Mm-hmm. Kenny, what about you?
I think that all of us could likely agree that that first moment of diagnosis, your fears are off the chart, and for me, I was 29, had a 1-year-old, and was just faced with like, oh shit, like, what, my dad died when I was fairly young. I was 23 when he passed away, and just that thought of like, man, if I hope I can make it another 22 years and he's 23. Like, that's the position that you put in versus like, oh, it's going to be great to see grandkids, great grandkids. It's like, man, I hope I can get through my kid getting out of college. That'd be awesome. And so anyway, that just to say that I think now, today, I rarely think about that worst case scenario. I've also, though, taken the time to plan for it. My will have as much life insurance as I can get through work. Obviously all of us, like, traditional life insurance is just out the freaking window. But, just trying to plan as much to care for my son financially, whether I'm here or not, to try to just take that off of my mind. But at the same time, I just want to add, and I think what I would like to leave with my perspective is we can become so focused on our own deaths, which are inevitable. We just don't get to choose the day. And then also on trying to prevent that we forget to live in the moment that we're with now. Even like one thing I try to do is I try to regularly live out adventures. And so like last week, just happened to upgrade my rental for work to a Mustang convertible and just drove so much that my whole arm was completely roasted, but like just being amongst the elk and the waterfalls and like you just feel like you're in a movie. And it's like, okay, I would like to leave a legacy because ultimately what I have left of my father is the stories, the memories, right? And so I would like to make as many of those as possible and just enjoy the absolute crap out of today and the moments that I have versus just sitting there in fear of, oh, well, what if I don't get to be at my son's wedding? What if I don't get to see him graduate high school? It's like, hey man, I got a little 3-year-old bundle of joy running around that looks at me like I'm a superhero. Let's have fun with that.
Yeah, I love that.
Perfect.
Kenny, thank you so much. Lindsay, what about you? Where's that fear now versus where it was at diagnosis, and even maybe when you got your biopsy results?
Well, the fear was out of this world when I first got my diagnosis, because I made the mistake the day of my diagnosis of Googling ocular melanoma while I was putting my daughter to bed that night, which was just such a terrible idea. But here's the thing. I'm a birth doula, and I feel like birth and death are viewed through a similar lens in that not a lot of people take the time to understand it as the sacred thing that it is, and as the transformational thing that it is. And so as a current birth doula and an aspiring death doula, I'm actively trying to change how I look at death so that there isn't fear when death is thought of. And actively trying to have those conversations with my kids and just kind of reshape how it's viewed. So the on the scale, it's very low, but that's an active choice in how I'm choosing to approach the idea of death.
No, I think that's such a good point. And I think I've heard you and a couple other people talk about just how our world really, like our culture, just really across the board in most cultures, I think. I can't speak for all, but I think especially in the United States, it's very taboo almost to talk about death and to talk about the process of death and to talk about it just can be very triggering for all of us, because I think, like Kenny said, we spend so much energy, so much time just trying to prevent it, right? Trying to avoid it, that then when we're confronted with it, like there's this large level of fear when confronted with it rather than acceptance. Kind of like with birth, like if you're going to have a baby and you don't have an epidural and you fight it, that's not a very good birthing experience. It doesn't feel very positive to fight against what naturally is going to happen. I've done that. Don't recommend. But really just being able to come to that place of acceptance. And I think it's a combined, what I'm hearing from you guys so far is that it's this combination of acceptance of what is, focus on what is now, and the empowering actions you take for tomorrow. And I think that kind of generally would sum it up. But I want to end with Lori. So Lori, go ahead. Where do you feel like your fear is now?
Sometimes I feel like I'm in denial because I would say my fear's a 1.5. I don't think about, I've done a lot of work with my fear, and I've done a lot of out of the box things with my fear. And it's just not where my focus is. So, if we don't put our attention there, or if we don't put our focus there, then our energy doesn't go there. And it's just not where my energy is.
Oh, I think that's such a good point. Well, you guys, this has been seriously such a powerful conversation. We've had a lot of feedback from those of our audience listening in on Facebook. I think just to cover this one question that I'm seeing, a couple of people are asking for recommendations. So if you guys don't mind, just later, sometime next week, go and give us, give the recommendations, or tell us where your integrative doctor is if you see an integrative doctor. But I don't think that it's necessary that the doctor have experience. If you're seeing a functional medicine, a naturopathic oncologist, do you guys think that it's important that they have uveal melanoma experience? I guess Lori, Hannah, this is more for you guys. Okay, and the reason being that the functional medicine doctor, the naturopathic oncologist, their focus is what's happening in the whole body. It's not a specialized, we have to only look at these tumors and why these tumors are growing. They're looking at what else in your body contributes to that pathway. So just hopefully to answer that question that came in. But I want to thank you guys for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I hope anyone who listens to this recording, please reach out to any of us. We're always happy to connect with you. And just to allude to one more announcement, I guess, for what's coming up next. In about a month from today, actually, we will have the Eye on Research, where we're going to be updating you guys on what's new in medicine as of ASCO, ARVO, and AACR, so the cancer research conventions that happened. And we've got lots of good things in store, so keep tuning in, and I thank you guys for your time today on this Saturday, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the I Believe podcast, brought to you by Castle Biosciences. Please be sure to subscribe, and if you're so inclined, send this episode over to friends, family, and share on your social media to help spread awareness around OM. If you have a moment, leave us a brief review or consider making a donation to the links in the show notes to keep our podcast going. Feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter @A Cure in Sight. We'll see you next time on the I Believe podcast.